Washington, D.C. HarDCore emerged in late 1979 and is considered one of the first and most influential punk scenes in the United States. In addition to influencing many music genres, it also led to the emergence of several important movements and organizations, which gave a voice to those who considered themselves a part of the burgeoning D.C. hardcore community. One of the most prominent movements to have resulted from the D.C. hardcore scene is the straight edge movement, which began in the early 1980s. Straight edge is a subculture of hardcore punk that was primarily inspired by the D.C. hardcore band Minor Threat, and the term straight edge comes from the band's 1981 song of the same name. Participants of the straight edge movement typically follow a set of principles focused on rejecting the often outrageous and immoderate behaviors associated with the punk subculture at the time. This included abstaining from using alcohol, tobacco, and other recreational drugs, and for some, even refraining from participating in casual sex. In addition to adhering to these principles, bands that identify themselves with the straight edge movement also seek to spread positive messages throughout their shows. For instance, this is what straight edge band Have Heart had to say to their fans during one of their performances.
Live, love, and learn. You are not a slave to your addictions. You are not a slave to depression. Peace be with you.
The symbol of the straight edge movement is the letter X, usually marked on the back of one's hands. The origin of the symbol can be traced to the DC hardcore band, the Teen Idols, whom during their 1980 West Coast tour were denied entry into a venue they were set to perform at, after the club's management discovered that none of the band's members were of legal drinking age. Luckily, the band was able to play, but only after they agreed to mark their hands with X's as a warning sign to the bartender to not serve them alcohol. When the Teen Idols returned to D.C., they suggested this method to local clubs so that teenagers would be allowed to see concerts without being served alcohol, a practice that is still popular to this day. As D.C. hardcore continued to grow, it slowly became associated with negative characteristics. Shows saw signs of increased violence, with many rambunctious audience members engaging in intense moshing, leading to the unintentional bodily injury of many concertgoers. The band Bad Brains became so notorious for their uncontrollable audiences that in 1979 they were prohibited from performing in D.C. clubs and venues. Not wanting to associate with D.C. hardcore's newfound reputation, many abandoned the scene until 1984 when the band Rite of Spring decided to challenge this widely held view of D.C. hardcore. Though the group was short-lived, they were instrumental in creating the movement that eventually became known as Revolution Summer. In June of 1985, there was a punk percussion protest at the South African Embassy against apartheid in the country, followed by a Rite of Spring show that evening at the 930 Club. Though mocked as insignificant at the time, the event marked the inception of Revolution Summer. The movement embraced and encouraged confrontational, creative protest, along with ideals such as feminism and vegetarianism. Animal rights and environmental issues were a large concern of the participants, inspiring a new generation of activists and the formation of eco-terrorist groups such as the Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front. Raw anger and passion characterized the movement, along with constant reminders of continual improvement and betterment of the self. The effects of Revolution Summer were long-lasting. Music-wise, the sounds of the movement appear to be the root of the emo and post-hardcore genres. Rise of Spring members Guy Picciotto and Brendan Canty, along with Minor Threat frontman Ian MacKaye, formed the post-hardcore band Fugazi that carried the ideas of Revolution Summer into mainstream music. In addition to influencing music, Revolution Summer also had a significant role in the formation of Positive Force DC. Positive Force DC is an activist organization that was founded in the year 1985 by Mark Anderson and other members of the DC punk and hardcore communities. Although it was only one of the dozen Positive Force chapters that existed across the country, the DC chapter was the only one to outlive the 80s and is the only Positive Force chapter that still exists today. According to the organization's website, the activist group seeks radical social change, personal growth, and youth empowerment. Former University of Maryland student David M. Weinstein created a documentary in 1991 centered on Positive Force and the impact the organization has had on the DC community. In the 25 years since the release of the documentary, the organization has done nothing but grow. By early 2000, Positive Force DC had coordinated nearly 300 benefit concerts that raised more than $200,000 for organizations that aimed to help residents of Washington, D.C. meet their basic needs and produce progressive and revolutionary change. Positive Force members have even volunteered on behalf of these organizations in the nation's capital, participating in protests against government policy at the local, national, and international levels. Finally, through much of its history, Positive Force offered communal meeting and living spaces for members of the hardcore punk community, in addition to providing significant financial support to the Arthur Fleming Center, which houses the Positive Force office and several other progressive organizations in the Washington, D.C. area. So, as we can see, DC hardcore has had a significant impact on mainstream society by emphasizing nonconformity and inspiring youth to make decisions for themselves.
The lies in the books to make a citizen out of you, because they sleep with a gun and keep an eye on you, son, so they can watch all the things you do. Because the drugs never work, they gonna give you a smirk, cause they got methods of keeping you clean. They gonna rip up your heads, your aspirations to shreds, another cog in the murder machine. They said I'm teenage and scared the living shit out of me. They could care less as long as someone will bleed. So darken your clothes, I'll strike a violent pose. Maybe they'll leave you alone, but not me. The boys and girls in the clique, the awful names at the stick. You're never gonna fit in much, kid. But if you're trouble